All right. Mark, you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do this.
All right. So, Shawn, tonight you are a special guest author.
It's kind of weird to be on the other side.
Yeah, well, I think it's, I'm pretty excited for you because I haven't seen the whole process, but, just kind of, working with you and being in touch with you over the last many months and knowing how hard you worked on this, it's really exciting to see this come to life, right? You're finally at the end of the road here.
Woohoo! Well, it's the end of, I just took an off ramp, and it's now a whole nother road.
Well, the next journey begins, but I think it's pretty exciting just because I know how much you put into this, and it's exciting to get here. So
it is. It's very gratifying, actually.
So
there's nothing like that feeling when your book, especially you walk into Barnes and Noble or something and you see your book on the shelf and you sit there and go, yeah, that's me. I like that.
I did that. Look at that.
That's his selfie.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Admittedly, I have had conversations with several people who know that I've not, I don't, well, how do I say this without sounding like a big ego? I'm a pretty modest person, and so I tend to downplay my accomplishments, and people are like not letting me do that. That's very thoughtful. To have people who are looking out for me, like, no, this is a big deal. You need to.
Yeah, it is. It is a big deal. And I've been it's a great book. I've really been enjoying it.
Thank you.
And so for those of you who aren't familiar with this, Shawn's new book, it's called The Optimistic Workplace, Creating an Environment that Energizes Everyone. And I have to say, I don't have a book cover to show up because we're talking pre-release. You have one? Okay, I love the battery with just the positive sign. That's a great image. And so I love that. And, going through this, before we get started, a few of these great, some questions and help you share some of the things. A few things that really stood out for me. I'm just looking at some of my notes, as I've been reading this over the past couple of weeks. So, human beings, not human capital. I'd love that. The whole idea of shepherding culture and shaping climate, energizing every team member. I think I love how you talk about in the book, individuals. People often talk in terms of leadership and organizations and the workforce in terms of teams. And I love how you also emphasize the individual. And before... Yeah, sorry, no.
Sorry, Jim. I'm just going to quickly say this book could not be better timed because look at the revolution that's occurring in the workplace right now.
Right.
Probably led by our millennial friends who are actually giving themselves permission to enjoy their work.
Yeah.
And be purpose-driven in their work. And so, Shawn, the timing is just perfect.
Yeah.
Thank God for timing, huh?
Yeah, and I have two interesting comments on that, and one which is in your book, and I wanted to share this because how an optimistic workplace has real business impact, and one data point that you shared was you reference a LinkedIn study with 18,000 employees, 15% were satisfied with their jobs. And I know we've talked about, these numbers about engagement, and so forth in the past, but just in the last 30 minutes, I noticed two of my former colleagues in different businesses who've just moved, specifically for Mark's point, moving to an environment, a team, a leadership group, in a role that they were passionate about, and they really wanted to, not just work, but enjoy. And
there was actually some new research that came out from a woman, and I'm not going to remember her name. Do I have it still up on my browser? I do. Michelle McQuaid, and she has a site called tellyourboss.com, and
I have to look at that.
Yeah, and one of the findings of their research was that 65% of those who participated in the research want to have a new boss over getting paid more money. They'd rather have a new boss than get more money. 65%.
Oh, Mark, you're on mute.
Mark, we can't hear you, buddy.
I said, I bet everybody on this call listening in, watching this video later, can all say, yeah, I've had a boss like that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, people don't leave jobs or roles or companies. They leave managers.
Yes, they do.
All right, so so looking at my notes on some of the things, and there's so much here to talk about. I'm really enjoying this, and this is so rich, Shawn. I mean, really, throughout the whole book. So I think really just, coming back to, the beginning of the book and helping kind of set the stage here, the things that stood out to me were what you were talking about really in the not too distant past. Employees and employers really just traded time for compensation, right? And, there wasn't really talk about what it felt like to work at a company. You simply went, you did your time, you got your paycheck, you clocked in, you clocked out. It was very production oriented, right? But that's changed today. And that's really kind of how you start off your book. So maybe tell us a little bit about that and why it's so important that we, workplaces be inherently optimistic. Why is this so important now?
Yeah. So the first thing that I think is important to point out is we spend a lot of our time working. Gallup, I think, has a conservative estimate that we spend a third of our time working. And when you think about the backdrop of low engagement, the 65% who would rather have a new boss than a pay increase, the 15% who were satisfied with their job, you look at those data points and how much time we spend, and I just felt, too many of us have a situation where work is a drag, and I really wanted to be able to give leaders an opportunity to get some insight into what they can do to shift that unfortunate trajectory of disengagement, unhappy employees, low morale, crappy work environments.
Right. Well, that's so true. So, and I have to say, I like the the positive, optimistic tone, of the book. And so, one of the things you talk about, I'm just looking at my notes here, that I think is something to really clarify, and it's really a key foundation to what you're talking about in the book, is the distinction between company culture and company climate. And, I think oftentimes, those are maybe misinterpreted or mixed. And you really talk a lot about climate as a path to culture, and that process addresses what you were just talking about, that proactive, taking the initiative, being very purposeful and being very intentional. So maybe share some of the insights.
Sure. So I think just for everybody listening, there's the distinction of culture and climate. Culture is how things get done around an organization, and climate is what it feels like to work somewhere. And what we have learned over the years, and when I say we, it's the collective we, not so much myself, but what research has taught us and shown us that a leader has the greatest impact on what the climate feels like. And when we look at culture shift, there is it's difficult to shift. And so climate is an easier and more influenced by a leader to be able to say, okay, if we want a culture that is more people-centric, what do we need to shift in the climate to be able to get us there? We think of culture as this the big kahuna in terms of what we need to change, and it is important. Don't get me wrong. In fact, if you don't change culture, the climate shifts are likely to kind of start to recede. So you really have to be able to focus on the climate to be able to shift the culture and really stick with it.
So Shawn, why do it seems like all we hear about is culture, not climate? Why?
Well, I think it's because we collapse climate into culture, and mostly what people are talking about is climate. Most people talk about what it feels like to work somewhere. Maybe they don't say those exact words. They might say, "Oh gosh, the culture is such a drag. It's really exhausting to me." Or, "Wow, the place really feels great. I have great employees or great coworkers." Those are often traits of the climate.
So, Shawn, my favorite part of your book is where you start to talk about pockets of excellence, and you use that phrase to describe a highly functioning team that may be doing really good work despite the culture and climate around them. Tell us more about pockets of excellence and their impact on the workplace, and most important, how do we use pockets of excellence to start to manage change in an organization?
Yeah. So the traditional approach to changing the workplace, whether it be through culture or climate, is that it starts with the CEO. And the CEO proclaims, "We are going to be," fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Right? And it takes forever. And oftentimes it doesn't happen, whatever it is. So a pocket of excellence says, let's go into the middle of the organization where actually really the work is happening, and work with the leaders there to be able to create this environment that, despite maybe what's going on around them, and we're assuming that it's not a healthy culture or climate, that the leader, because they have the greatest influence on what people experience in the workplace, could create this bubble that can be high performing despite the surrounding environment. And there is this, I totally forgot what your question was, Mark.
It's about pockets of excellence and how we use them to make real change in hopefully a quicker manner. So basically what happens is if the leader is really working on cultivating workplace optimism, what ends up happening is it becomes a vibrant team, and they start getting results that those around them don't. And people start paying attention, going, "Wow, Mark, what is it that your team is doing over there? Because you guys are really kicking butt." So it's a much more natural way to allow for a shift to happen within the organization. And it's also more sustainable. Because what happens is the pocket of excellence becomes contagious, and others want to know, what is it that you're doing and how are you doing it? Yeah. And this isn't just a theory, right? I mean, we're at our consulting clients, we see this almost every day. We see small groups that just say, "Screw it, I don't care what's going on around me, I'm going to do good."
That's right.
And I'm going to do good work.
That's right.
And I'm going to treat people with respect and forget that's the way we've always done it. This is how I'm going to do my work at this company.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And what's interesting is the contagious part becomes what people are attracted to. And sometimes we give a lot of attention to the naysayers, and the naysayers get the voice. Well, this is shifting that, saying, the naysayers are going to be there, and not to diminish them, because in some ways their input helps improve circumstances. But rather than focus solely on what the naysayers say, it's like we want the positive to be contagious, not the negative.
Right. Yeah, that's so key. So, we're talking about, the optimistic workplace. And I think we certainly understand it intrinsically. And I think this is something everyone wants in an organization. Maybe talk about this maybe from the view of the organization, whether even a small not-for-profit to, Fortune 50. I mean, what is the impact to the business and the business outcomes? Kind of what's in it for the organization?
Yeah, good question. So this is, I say in the book that this isn't just some touchy-feely
a group hug theory.
Right.
That it is real. And I spent time studying 7 specific organizations. I did well over 100 different interviews with employees within these organizations that had created optimistic work environments. And what's interesting about each of them, and I studied startups all the way up to large corporations, and it didn't matter the size, they all were outperforming their competitors. So for example, you look at Menlo Innovations, which is a software development company in Ann Arbor, Michigan. They have only 50 employees, and they stay small on purpose. They don't have any managers. They win massive contracts that large organizations would die for. So for example, one of them is, I don't remember the name of the device, but it's basically used in AIDS research. They're not specializing in technology for AIDS research. They specialize in creating software that works. And they are able to do this because they can come together, work effectively, get shit done. We can cuss, right? And
you just did.
No bleeping there. And they are in the millions of dollars in terms of the revenue. Luck Companies, which is another company that I feature, they're an aggregate company back in outside of Richmond, Virginia, and they're the third most. Well, they're the top regional aggregate business back east, but they're the third most profitable. So what's in it for an organization is certainly profit, right? Certainly effectiveness, certainly progress. And I think we don't talk enough about progress. I can tell you the number of organizations that I've consulted with where employees would just die to be able to finish something, but something is always on their to-do list.
Right.
So it really helps facilitate organizational effectiveness in a manner that non-optimistic environments can't.
Yeah, and I like what you said. I can't remember which chapter it was, but it was the difference between, I think it was, you're talking about the terms were team player and team worker.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Someone just showing up, doing meets minimal versus someone who's showing up really engaged, excited, energized, passionate about, and bringing, their best self, right?
Yeah.
Their most creative ideas. They're kind of unleashed. They're not constrained.
That's right.
Keeping their head down. And that's the difference. That's where business outcomes, you put those two people competing, the energized, excited person is going to win every time.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, let's face it, guys. The industrial age kind of beat the creativity out of us for decades.
Right.
We were taught to be productive to a certain standard. We were taught to follow process and to not rock the boat. And now we have this new energy around us where the as you said, Shawn, the more creative teams, the more purpose-driven teams are just kicking butt on just about everybody else. Yeah.
There's something that I learned that was surprising to me that addresses what we're talking about here is in these optimistic environments, there is no patience for slackers. The employees are high performing and they have high expectations of each other and themselves. There's something that Netflix says that is applicable here, and Netflix talks about hiring mature, fully functioning adults. And that's what really is evidenced in these optimistic environments, that you don't have people who are like, I'm just going to kind of coast here or cut corners. When you hire mature, fully functioning adults, these are people who are saying, look, I'm at the top of my game and I want to continue to be there. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to show up that way. And if you don't show up, I'm going to have a conversation with you because you're slowing the team down. And in these optimistic environments, there's that willingness to have those conversations, not to be mean, but to say, hey, look, we've got stuff that we've got to get done, and we need everybody pulling their weight.
So Shawn, what's going through my thought right now, and certainly when I read the book, it went through my thought was, this sounds really great for a new startup, a new nonprofit, 50 to 100 employees, where you can, impact culture more easily. What do we do with those companies that have this mindset that are definitely suffering from the way we've always done it syndrome, that can't grab this? How does a leader start to impact change when 60% of their workforce or more is deliberately disengaged?
Yeah.
How do we do that?
Yeah. So that's where the pocket of excellence comes into play, right? That you've got to, as a leader, you've got to be willing to say, I'm going to create this pocket of excellence. So then that raises the next question, and that's what you're asking, Mark, is, well, what do I do, right? So, just for the sake of time, what I'll say is there are three top actions that a leader can take to be able to create and shift the environment. Before I say that, I will say this. You bring up a really important point, that when a leader decides to say, okay, I'm going to create this optimistic workplace for my team, they're likely to meet employees are likely to be like, really? What is this? Right? They're not going to be cheering and shouting hallelujah. They're going to be, they're going to be cautious and really wonder, is this just another fad? And that's just a reality of corporate America, or an organization or a team that hasn't had optimism in it for any time, or if ever. So the first thing is create clarity. And clarity, while that isn't anything like groundbreaking, it's groundbreaking for it's a necessary ingredient for optimism in the workplace. So there are some key things that you want to focus on as a leader around clarity. One is making sure that there are goals and that employees know what the goals are, right? So this goes back to our, measuring, are we making progress? Are we doing something that's contributing to the business? There needs to be goals, and prioritization needs to be clear. In these non-optimistic work environments, everything's a top priority. Everybody's running around with their hair on fire. This is, I got to finish this. I got to work on that. Oh my God, we got a new fire drill. That's not, while that happens, and it doesn't matter how optimistic or not, that's going to happen. But when it's the predominant vibe of the workplace, likely the culprit is prioritization. There is no prioritization. There's no agreed upon prioritization of what is important. So goals, priority, and feedback. Feedback is really key. I have to know when I'm doing really well, and I have to know when I'm not pulling my weight. And in caring cultures and in caring climates, those difficult conversations, people have them. So create clarity. The next is reinforce relatedness. And what I mean by that is simply that we as human beings are hardwired to want to connect with one another. And we've created work environments that kind of cut out this ability to connect with each other, right? I think a lot of times, at least in America, we celebrate the rugged individual. I'm going to come in and I'm going to do my best work, and look at me, and I've got my goals that I'm going to accomplish through my work. The problem with that is we start to support the individual and not what the collective can create. And when we support the individual, we can't really focus on relatedness. So we've got to be able to create a more collaborative type of work environment, as well as start connecting people across the team, even outside the organization. And the last one that I'll focus on is what I call lean on leadership. 70% of how an employee experiences the workplace is based on the leader's style. That's a huge influence. That isn't something that I made up. That's based on research that Hay Group and Gallup have recently published. So your style as a leader plays a very, very important role and how people experience the climate and the culture. So leaders need to focus on that. What is my style? And I put in the book different leadership skills that are important to focus on. One of which is, or one category is know yourself. You got to know yourself. And it's not like you're going to suddenly just be Buddha and, very enlightened and everything about yourself. It's an ongoing process, right? And the other is focusing on the good of the great, what's important for the whole group to be successful. There are different skill sets that are part of both of those. So those are the three things that I would say a leader wants to focus on to be able to create this pocket of excellence, to be able to create this type of environment where people feel like good things are going to come from their hard work. That was a long answer.
Yeah, but they're good. I mean, it's good, good steps in that progression, right? And it doesn't happen overnight. You need to be purposeful about it and make, especially with entrenched organizations and entrenched teams, creating that climate, right? To then shape that culture.
That's right.
So maybe we can rewind a little bit just to something you mentioned earlier about that small organization, or maybe there's some other instances, and you said, it's a pretty bold statement in the book that you don't need managers. And I'd love to hear, your kind of view on this. And in that particular organization, you said there was about 50 individuals and there were no managers. I'm just really curious, how that works and what you found to, be kind of the secret to that being successful, or the advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah. So first of all, Mark, we can't hear you, so I just want to make sure you knew that.
I fixed that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. So I'm not an advocate or I'm not advocating that we get rid of managers. I think what I am advocating is that we evolve management to what I call stewardship. And I'm not the first person to come up with this. One of my favorite thinkers, Gary Hamel, writes about stewardship in his books. Peter Block wrote a book called Stewardship. So it's not anything new that I came up with. What I am saying, though, is that if we're going to create environments that are optimistic, where people believe that something good is going to come from their time that they spend with an organization, whether it be purposeful, meaningful work, fulfillment, whatever it happens to be, we can't just rely on planning and monitoring, which are typical management type activities, right? Management has kind of become soulless. It's just, how do we find the greatest efficiency in whatever we're doing at the cost of people? Now, I'm not saying that people are the answer for everything. I don't believe that. But I do believe that as a steward, the mindset shift is, I am responsible for these people who I have been entrusted to lead. That's a very different belief than I'm here to monitor these people to do work that I've assigned them. Right.
It's like what we talked about, in the last couple of weeks on SocialLeader Chat, right? The difference between bureaucracy, right? Command and control versus,
and leadership, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it just happens to be that Menlo Innovations has no managers. I can tell you Bamboo HR, which is another company that's featured, they've got managers. The hierarchy exists in all of these organizations. They just happen to leverage it to be more effective than some of these archaic organizations. Right.
But it's that mindset of service.
That's
so
right.
Important, right?
Yeah. That's an important point. This belief that we're here to do good, that's in our human nature. It's part of our overall makeup. Why shouldn't businesses tap into that? It just makes so much sense.
Too much sense, maybe. Maybe this is too revolutionary.
Perhaps.
So, Shawn, before I ask my next question, I want to let everybody know, if you guys have a question, everybody listening in or watching, if you have a question, put it in the comments section, or use the questions tool in Blab. Or if you want to go on the air with us, let us know. Jim will pipe you in. You can ask your question on the air. So don't let us dominate the conversation. And one of the best parts about Blab is everybody gets to to join in. So
right.
Join us. So Shawn, you talk throughout the book. You talk in almost every conversation you and I have, and you certainly mentioned it in the last 30 minutes. The idea or the impact purpose has, not just in your book, but in work in general.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that. When do we start to become more aware of the role purpose played in the workplace?
So this, I think, again, goes back to what the millennials have introduced into the corporate conversation, the work conversation, that millennials want to do something that is important to them. Now, that's not to say that millennials are the first for that. I think it's just they are bringing the conversation up that so many of us have been waiting for. I'll answer the question this way. So one of my top values is purpose. And to me, purpose is a guide to help me decide, is what I'm doing bringing meaning to what I'm doing? And if it's not, the question is, why am I even doing this? And I think what we're finding is more and more people are waking up to this reality. That's why we are seeing a huge shift. I think it's in part why we're seeing a huge shift in the number of freelancers, people who are saying, I'm going to go do my own thing. So purpose plays an important role, not to push people off the organization, it could, but really to be able to say, look, you're here Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. How do we help you find a greater calling, or just help you connect what you find interesting with helping the organization be successful? Really aligning purpose and impact, organizational impact, customer impact, in a meaningful conversation. It doesn't have to be this awkward conversation. It could simply be, what's important to you? What do you find is the best way to get purpose out of the work that in the time that you spend with us? You'll floor employees. Employees be like, what? But I think it'll be a good conversation.
Well, it's a good conversation to have, and I like how you talk about this in the book about doing this. For leaders, sharing vision, right? I love this in the book, meaning makers.
Yeah.
Inspiring, teams, but also at the individual level, because different people have different views, feelings about, purpose and mission.
Yeah.
Right.
So something that I didn't mention about purpose that I think needs to be said is that it's not just a conversation it's not just a spiritual conversation. Purpose, actually, from what researchers have found, is linked to a person's resilience. Can they withstand, kind of getting knocked down and not getting back up, but moving forward? And I talk about some research that was done that was called eye blink reflexology, where basically they showed people, the researchers showed people disturbing images. And what they found is people who had a stronger sense of purpose were more willing, or were able to recover quicker from the disturbing images as it was registered by their eye blink. Because when we are disturbed or concerned or stressed, our eye blinks are more rapid. So the point here is purpose in the workplace, especially with it being so stressful, helps employees actually. It helps them with their well-being.
So, Shawn, we've got a question that Lauren has shared here from, I think this is coming in from the Twitter feed. How can employees at the bottom of the totem pole start to transition in the workplace? So, if someone feels, I'm not a leader, but I want to make a change, what tips or advice do you have for that person?
Yeah, that's an important part of the conversation, and it's actually not one that I write about in the book. So I think, what this question points to, that there's a shared responsibility, right? There's the leader and the employee, and how do we help the employee raise this conversation? Mm-hmm. So I would start with, start and make it personal, right? So Jim, if you're my leader, sitting down with you and saying, look, I like what I'm doing, but I want more. And here's what I want, mm-hmm. but I also need this from you. And that might sound like, what employee is going to say that? But I think that if you're an employee who is really interested in creating this kind of environment, you have to have that awkward conversation. Much to many people's surprise, leaders are not mind readers, right?
Well, and it goes back to what you talked about earlier, creating relational organizations, relational workplaces. That's where individuals, really, you have nothing to lose.
Right.
Engaging at a very, on a person-to-person level, sharing what you need. You can always leave and go somewhere else, which I think Mark can do. I can see the words on Mark's mouth. Leave, which a lot of people are doing. That is the absolute reality, and I see it every single week. You talk about organizations like this group in Menlo Park, who are top performers, looking to work with other top performers. We share the same, sense of mission and purpose, for the clients they serve and the way they do it. And for individuals who find themselves in an environment that's not that, right, they tend to leave. That's always a last resort, but I love the suggestion on how any individual can start to maybe create that pocket of excellence from the inside out. Just changing the conversation.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you another thing that we see often, Jim, and I bet you do too with your work, is as the climate starts to change, as the culture starts to drift toward the culture we want to have, people self-select, and the boomer that was hired 20 years ago at this big corporation says, you know what, this isn't for me. This isn't the company I grew up with, and I think it's time to move on. And in that sense, attrition becomes our best friend, right, Shawn?
That's right. There is such a thing as good attrition. And I think what's important here is that this is a recognition of the rules of the game called work have changed. And to continue to think that employees are there because it's in honor of you, the organization, you're missing the point. Really, it's a mutually beneficial relationship. How can I, employee, help you, organization, achieve what it needs to achieve? And how can you, organization, help me achieve what I need and want to achieve? And when leaders understand that, they'll really start to see a transformation in the way that they can relate to their employees. It's no longer, the other point that I make is that employees are not resources or assets. Resources and assets have limited shelf life, right? We have unlimited possibility. So we can actually shift all we want. We just have to be willing to have the conversations and pay attention to the changing dynamics that in this thing that we call work. So we have this question here that I'm sorry, I'm playing host all of a sudden.
You can't help it.
It's your book.
That pay compliment is asking. And I think before we move off of this topic of purpose, we should answer it. How do leaders help bring this to a sharp point with their team members? So when I wrote the book, my editor said, Shawn, we can't just make this a what and a why. We have to make it a how. So in the book, there are guided questions to help you guide your employees to find purpose. And one of the questions actually is more of a kind of an activity where you have the person kind of reflect back on times in their career that were high points, and help them kind of discover what was important about those times. The other piece is we have to recognize we're talking about a whole person, not an employee, right? A whole person who has personal and professional interests. Also ask them, what are the things that really energize you when you're not at work? And start to help them draw some connections in their answers to what might their purpose be. Another important way to help employees get to this clarity about purpose is to have them do some values identification. And I'm going to put in the chat stream here. You want to go to Google Igniter and Luck companies. And when you Google that, you're going to find one of the options is a tool called Igniter, and it's an automated tool that will walk a person through values identification. When you know what you stand for, you have a chance to be more clear on what is important to you. So I think those are probably some things that a person can do to be able to help get clear on what their purpose is.
All right, that goes back to what you said earlier about knowing yourself.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
Yep.
So, Shawn, we're talking a lot about culture and climate and the need to change now. Fast forward 3 years from now, when a company is doing amazing work in this area, they've read your book, they jumped in head first, and the workplace really is becoming optimistic. What impact does that have, not just on the stuff we talked about like morale, but bone deep pride in the work that's being done, the ability to attract new talent, profits, everything. What's next?
What's next after climates that are optimistic? Is that what you're asking? Yeah.
Let's just say we do everything you say, and now we turn a company that was primarily disengaged employees and team members and managers, and now we're doing all the right things. We're pushing all the right buttons. Take hiring first. What is that? Does that help us attract better talent? Any research on that?
Sure. Yeah. So there's not a lot of. I wouldn't go as far as to say it helps attract talent, because I think attracting talent is it's not my expertise, but it's a very different game today than what it used to be. And but I will say this: because you create a pocket of excellence, people talk about it, and word gets out. And when word gets out, people want to be part of something that is good, right? And they want to be part of something that things get done. And I'm trying not to cuss here. So it does help certainly raise awareness of the good things that you as a leader are doing because you've created optimism. But there are many factors that weigh into what attracts someone to a team or to an organization. I think the other piece that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about is, when we look at organizations where there's low engagement or active disengagement, there's a cap on what they're capable of accomplishing, right? It becomes mediocre, and mediocrity becomes kind of this, it's an accepted reality. And over time we kind of go, oh, this is just the way things are around here. Mm-hmm. So workplace optimism says, no, we've got great potential here. Human potential is unlimited in terms of what it can accomplish. So the team continually finds itself redefining what it can and can't do. And that becomes a really great sense of pride. I like your bone deep pride phrase, Mark. So those are, I think, definite benefits that can come down the road. I think I'd be just happy to hear more organizations creating these pockets of excellence where there is optimism, so that we could start addressing these really disappointing numbers that are coming out with great regularity around how awful it is in the workplace.
So, is anyone else watching have any other questions? Also, Lauren,
last chance. Speak up now.
If anyone, from Social Leader chat community, if anyone over on Twitter, Lauren, if you want to pass over any questions.
So I have one more question for you, Shawn.
Yeah.
When you first started writing The Optimistic Workplace, what was your goal? What did you want to get out of it?
Yeah. So I have two answers to that. One is an aspirational and one is a very practical. Aspirationally, I wanted to give managers who are in the middle of the hierarchy some hope that they could actually do something and make work not just enjoyable for employees, but for themselves. Mm-hmm. So that's the aspirational piece. I'm a pretty optimistic guy, and I'm also an idealist. So, ideally, that's what I would love to see happen. Practically, what I'd like to see is, more speaking engagements. And I'd love the book to be a bestseller, right? What writer doesn't hope for that? But what really drives me is the aspirational. So we got another question that looks like.
Yeah, let's see. I got a question here about how do you get non-HR executives on board? So operational execs tend to push back on these ideas as touchy-feely sometimes.
Yeah. I hate that phrase, but it's said all the time. It's like, oh, good grief, are we not human beings? Human beings want to be liked. Human beings want to be included. And those are all the things that people consider touchy-feely. But right. I think what, Billy, I think what you're saying, it's a true statement. It's like, how do we get people who view this stuff as like, we don't need emotions in the workplace. A couple places to start, I think, would be, I mentioned at the beginning, as some of you might have mentioned this, one of the actions that you can take to be able to create optimism is create clarity. And creating clarity is around setting goals, helping employees prioritize their work, prioritizing work in the larger organization, whether it be your team or the whole organization, providing feedback and syncing what the team is doing with the bigger picture of what the organization is doing. That's pretty non-touchy-feely, and I think even if you just are successful in that space, you're going to see a shift in how people show up at work. So that would be a place to start for the non-touchy-feely execs. But I will say this, Billy, I work with executives all the time, and Mark and I do, and I'm bored with executives. And this is going to go out to the world, and executives are going to hear this and say, why the hell would I work with you? You said you're bored with us. And I only say that because I think sometimes executives get too caught up in playing it safe for whatever political reasons. And we really, we've got to start shifting our mindset to, what's right for me to, what's right for the whole team? What's right for my organization, whatever size that organization is.
Well, what I love about, the approach in the book, the aspiration about meeting or helping managers, talk about mid-level, is organizations are like this, right? It's a pyramid. Only a few, people on top and, senior executive roles, the majority of the people who, as you've said many times, get stuff done are first line managers, right? Who are, it's like, a couple of weeks back, we talked with Johnny Michelle, right? Talk about, hey, General, you need to take that hill, and we need it by Tuesday, and he would, move out and go and figure out how to do it. It's the same thing with, managers. If, you have a certain strategy and goals, but, it's really that kind of middle management in the organization that has to energize and inspire and lead people and, tap into everyone's creativity to figure out how are we going to get that hill on Tuesday. Bottom line, that's who's getting it done. Any organization, right?
That's right. Absolutely. Amen, brother.
Isn't it funny then, guys, that we put executives and human resources personnel in charge of things like culture and leadership and workplace issues? When did that start, and how do we stop it?
And it's tough. Well, it's just different parts of the leadership and different parts of the organization having different responsibilities, and stakeholders that they're serving. And I can certainly appreciate, and we've all seen it, working with executives, the challenges there. But I just love the focus here on, the kind of mid-level managers on how to create and foster those pockets of excellence. And, it's really interesting to see those happen in organizations, because going back to earlier what you said, people gravitate toward that. Top talent starts to find you because they want to be part of that group and they want to make things happen. So, did we lose Shawn?
Well, I hope not. We're about to close up. We can't give him kudos for the book if his face isn't there. We lost Shawn.
I thought we wanted to say. We'll wait for you, Shawn, to come back in.
Let's give him a few seconds to come back. So, Jim, you work for a really big company. As you read Shawn's book, do you go, God, we got to do this? Man, we have to start this.
Oh yeah,
right?
I think so. I think absolutely, and I love how, it comes down to individuals, having conversations and sharing things with individuals, and I love this notion of pocket of excellence, and I think there's some degree of hope there, and there's some degree of reality that any organization and anywhere, regardless of size, you can make a difference.
Yeah.
I think that's that's exciting.
Yeah, it's very motivating too. I think when we talk about motivation, oftentimes, and it still surprises me that with 20 plus years of research showing that money is not a top motivator, management still thinks money is a motivator. Really, it's the intrinsic motivators that make a big difference. And I think that's a key insight for leaders who want to create workplace optimism. Purpose, meaning, fulfillment, work-life mix. Those are all intrinsic motivators. They have nothing to do with how much I'm paid or, if I'm going to promote up. All of those things are important, and they will always be important, but their influence on my performance is short-lived.
Right. It's the difference between what you talk about, the work, the work member versus the team player.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Off the charts. And it has nothing to do with money. Money gets you here. Somebody fulfilling a specific role, specific responsibilities, right? It's that relational, everything that you've talked about, purpose and mission, that's what bumps people up here. That's why people bring their best to, the work that they're doing.
Yeah. So one of the companies that is in the book is Barry Waymiller. And Barry Waymiller is a large, it's a private organization that builds these large machines for a lot of different manufacturing type customers. A very blue collar organization. And Bob Chapman, who's the CEO, he doesn't talk about what Barry Waymiller does. He talks about his people. And I think what he is doing is taking what is very demanding work physically, and in some cases very monotonous, which could be, you could see high turnover because of that. They actually, I don't remember what their turnover numbers are, but because of this truly human leadership, which is what Bob calls his leadership style, where the family is central to the success, family in quotes, because we all define family differently. He understands that what motivates people isn't just the work, it's the people they work with. It's the conditions in which they work.
Oh,
this
that's
was
so true.
Fast. I can't believe it's so
really fast.
Well, Shawn, I really want to thank you for sharing all your insights. I'm loving this book. I'm grateful that you wrote it.
Jim.
And I think it's great. And everyone can, if I got this right, you can go to switchandshift.com and you can pre-order the book, right?
Probably the best. We don't have it on our site yet. The best thing to do
is too new.
I know. Is to
I
go
thought
to the
I
books.
saw it there. You
saw a badge. Go to the book's website, theoptimisticworkplace.com. If you want to check out, you can get a free chapter. If you want to check out the book, you can get a free chapter. And then also you can get you'll get the Optimism Planner, which is a guide to how to create optimism in the workplace in 30, 60, 90-day increments. And I see that Mark Gavin had a question, and Mark, I will answer it on Twitter for you. How's that?
Perfect.
Cool.
Perfect. Well, Shawn, I having watched you give birth to this baby and now see it growing up, I can't even begin to tell you how proud of you we are.
Thank you.
And not just because of the work you put into it, but the great work it turned out to be. So congratulations on the book. I hope everybody runs out and grabs a copy because this is an important conversation right now.
I would agree. Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys. Shark, Shawn, Mark.
Shawn and Mark.
It's your new
That's a new one.
That's funny.
The
We're
twin.
the new Brangelina.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll talk to you
All
later.
right. Talk to you later.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week on Social Leader Chat.